Neurologist doctor reveals how to hack your brain for success. Use the movers routine, sunlight, visualization, meditation. This strengthens your thinking brain over your reactive brain. Through neuroplasticity and brain exercises, you rewire your reality. Control stress with breathwork and conscious habits. Your brain is programmable. Optimize it.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You've handed us a stack of sources, articles, studies, and a whole lot of research, all focused on peak performance, cognitive optimization, and resilience.
Yep.
Our mission today is to cut through all the noise, extract the fundamental neuroscience-backed techniques, and essentially hand you the user manual for turning your brain into a machine that's, well, optimized for success.
That's exactly right. And this isn't just about motivational slogans. This is applied biology.
Right.
We are diving deep into how the actual architecture of your brain determines your daily output.
Yes.
Specifically, we're going to look at the critical battle that happens between your prefrontal cortex.
The commander.
The commander, exactly. And your limbic system, which is more like a primal threat scanner. And we'll show you how measurable tools from manipulating brain waves to specific breath work can give that commander absolute control.
And before we get into the nuts and bolts of routines and rituals, we have to tackle the core question that really underpins this entire deep dive. Is it genuinely possible to rewire your brain to not just tolerate tasks that feel hard or overwhelming, but to actually, anticipate them and get excited about them?
And the material we looked at gave a really clear yes on that. It turns out the biggest hurdle isn't the task itself.
It's the starting.
It's the inertia of starting. Success is often less about some massive, complex internal rewrite and more about rewiring your reality by just mastering the first 5 minutes of any action.
Okay.
Once that momentum starts, the brain is designed to shift its operational mode automatically. And that is the simple but pretty profound promise we are unpacking today.
Okay, let's unpack this with the ultimate foundation. Brainwaves. Everyone hears the terms delta, theta, alpha, beta, but I think very few of us understand how these frequencies function as the fundamental operating systems, the literal gears of our cognition.
That's a great way to put it. Think of brainwaves like the engine speed of your mind. We move across 4 primary states. So when you're in the deepest, most restorative stage of sleep, that is delta.
The slowest rhythm.
The slowest rhythm. The low idle of the engine. Now, as you begin to wake up and start engaging with the world, the frequency increases.
And that brings us to the state most people spend their day in. The state we need for analytical thinking, problem solving, reading, all of that, which is beta.
Right. Beta is the fast rhythm. It's the operational mode of engagement.
The on switch.
Exactly. But between those two extremes are the two critical states for cognitive hacking, theta and alpha.
Okay.
Theta is a bit slower than alpha, associated with that border between sleep and wakefulness and deep meditative states. It is the absolute powerhouse for creativity, for vision, and for accessing subconscious programming.
And alpha.
Alpha is a slightly faster, relaxed wave state. You often get there when you just close your eyes or when you're feeling calm and, mentally receptive.
The sources are highly critical of this common behavior that sabotages peak performance right from the get-go. They call it the 0 to 5th gear transition. Tell us why jumping straight from delta to high beta is so damaging.
Because it's a complete shock to the system. The alarm goes off, you grab your phone.
Yeah, we all do it.
You check notifications, you start ruminating about the day's tasks, or worse, you get into that social media doom scroll. You've gone from deep sleep, from delta, straight to frantic stress. High beta.
And that abrupt transition forces your body's stress response into what? Just complete overdrive.
Absolutely. The sudden rush activates the sympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate elevates, cortisol spikes, your blood pressure shoots up.
So you're telling your brain to run at max capacity before it's even ready.
Before the necessary neurochemical systems are even synchronized. You are essentially generating unnecessary mental strain and starting the day from a position of depletion, not power.
This is why hacking that theta alpha power phase is so essential. How do we ensure that slow, mandatory transition, delta to theta to alpha to beta?
The sources all stress that the critical first hour is the opportunity. If you can hijack the theta and alpha phases, you are accessing the most suggestible, most powerful window to influence the trajectory of your entire day.
So you're preloading the day's success protocols.
You are.
So here's the immediate actionable technique. When the alarm goes off, what is the hard stop rule?
Don't move. And crucially, Do not reach for the phone. Just commit to 5 minutes with your eyes closed. You're utilizing the natural state you're already in, that low-frequency theta-alpha state.
And why is that specific state so effective for planting suggestions? What's going on there?
Because in that state, the critical thinking, the highly analytical filter of the high beta brain, it hasn't fully booted up yet. Your subconscious mind is wide open. It's receptive.
So you use those 5 minutes for intentional autosuggestions.
Structured autosuggestions, affirmations, detailed visualization about your most immediate goals for the day, the week, even the year. You are giving your brain the first set of instructions before the outside world can interfere.
Okay, so once that internal programming is done, the sources demand a very specific first physical act. What is it, and what's the neurological basis?
Sunlight exposure. It has to be immediate. The light activates the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN.
The SCN, okay.
Which is this tiny region in your hypothalamus that acts as your body's absolute master clock.
So just opening the blinds or stepping outside is literally telling the SCN, okay, it is daytime. Begin the internal process of waking and regulation.
Precisely. This synchronization is key to a robust circadian rhythm. And the material notes that ancient practices, like the Hindu ritual of Surya Arghya, offering water to the rising sun, were fundamentally just sophisticated biological hacks to ensure this light input happened immediately.
That clarity leads directly to the caffeine rule, which the sources mandate.
Now, we love our coffee. Why the strict avoidance for the entire first hour?
It all boils down to cortisol management. See, when you wake up, your body naturally releases cortisol. It's a stress hormone, but it helps lift you out of sleep. This natural surge is essential.
Right.
Caffeine is a powerful stimulant that enhances the effects of cortisol. So if you drink it immediately, you spike your cortisol levels unnaturally high right at the beginning of the day.
Which means what exactly? What's the downside? It just burns out your system prematurely. You get that initial hyper alertness, sure, but you deplete your adrenal system. That leads to the afternoon crash and increased general anxiety throughout the day.
So you wait.
You wait 60 to 90 minutes. You let the natural cortisol curve peak and subside a bit before you introduce caffeine. The result is a much steadier, sustained focus and way less stress.
That's a strong mechanism. Now, let's distinguish between things we do mindlessly and things we do with intentionality. The sources draw a really sharp line between a habit and a ritual.
Right. A habit is something you do on autopilot. It requires minimal cognitive effort, like buttoning your shirt.
Right.
A ritual, however, is a sequence of actions you perform with full, undivided attention. And that commitment is what builds the strength of the frontal cortex. The sources synthesize these essential morning rituals into the MOVERS acronym.
And this is where we have to pause and realize this isn't meant to be like a 3-hour routine.
Right.
The sources really emphasize efficiency. So let's walk through the MOVERS ritual, maybe 5 minutes per step.
Okay. So M is for meditation. This is the dedicated practice of stillness, building that alpha-theta state we just talked about. Even 5 minutes focusing on the breath is enough to quiet the chatter.
Okay, M is meditation. What's O?
O is for oxygenation, dedicated breath work. This isn't just, deep breathing. It's intentional techniques like focused diaphragmatic breathing to actively regulate your nervous system.
Shifting you from stress to rest.
From sympathetic to parasympathetic. Then V is for visualization, mental rehearsal. We'll get into the studies on this, but this is visualizing the success of the day and feeling the positive emotions that go with it.
MOVE.
E is for exercise, physical movement. And crucially, the sources emphasize incorporating cross-lateral training movements that cross the midline of the body.
Why is that important?
It forces the two hemispheres of the brain to communicate efficiently, which enhances coordination and focus.
Okay, R.
R is for ready. Consuming affirmative, positive content. Because that subconscious door is still open from the theta phase, you're feeding your mind empowering ideas, not negative news or criticism.
And finally, S.
S is for scribing. This is the catharsis step. Writing out what is not serving you. Anxiety, resentment, grudges, specific limiting beliefs. It's an intentional release.
You're cleaning the mental whiteboard before you start the day's work?
Exactly.
That scribing seems like the most crucial component for cleansing the limbic system's residue before the PFC can take command. But let's zoom in on visualization, the V. Why is mental rehearsal such a powerful superpower?
Because the brain, well, it can't distinguish between a highly detailed, emotionally resonant mental rehearsal and actually doing the thing physically.
Really?
Yeah. When you visualize, you're priming all the necessary neural circuits, you're releasing the right neurochemicals, and you're creating this This feed-forward loop, this pre-preparation, reduces the perceived stress when the actual task happens.
And this is backed by some incredibly specific, measurable neurological data. Tell us about the piano players study.
It's a fantastic study. Researchers took a group of novice piano players and split them. One group physically practiced a difficult sequence for 2 hours a day. The other group just sat silently and imagined practicing the same sequence. They paid attention to the feel of the keys, the sound of the music, all in their head.
And the result?
After 3 months, they used brain scans, looking specifically at the primary motor cortex. And they found that the growth of neural circuits, the actual physical connections in the brain for controlling those movements, was almost identical between the physical players and the mental imagers.
That is profound. Imagination literally creates the neurological architecture of a skill, even without any physical muscle engagement.
And this was cemented by another famous study on little finger strength. One group did daily physical exercises to strengthen their little finger. The other group simply imagined doing those intense exercises.
And the imaginers got stronger.
They achieved almost comparable strength gains. The implication is staggering. The mind dictates the physical reality by creating the blueprint first.
So the key isn't just seeing the outcome, it's practicing the feeling of success, like the sources put it, first here, then there. You have to internalize the reality before it manifests externally.
Exactly. You have to integrate the emotional circuitry with the motor circuitry. If you just visualize without that emotional investment or without repetition, the brain just registers it as fantasy.
But if you immerse yourself,
the smell, the sounds, the feeling of victory, the neural circuits are strengthened, creating a strong command that your brain will naturally seek to fulfill.
Before we move into the brain's architecture, let's revisit that quick hack for waking up, the pillow talk power hack. When we tell our mind to wake up at a specific time just before sleep, why does this genuinely seem to work?
This is a perfect example of leveraging that theta state for an internal command. When you fall asleep, your consciousness begins to wane, and that critical judgmental part of the PFC, it powers down, making the mind extremely suggestible.
But what's the actual mechanism? It feels a bit like magic, but it has to be rooted in biology.
It is. It's rooted in the complex interlinked systems of the body, which the sources term, it's a mouthful, psychoneurophysio-immunoendocrinology.
Wow. Okay, break that down for us.
It just acknowledges that the psyche, your consciousness, and your command is directly connected to the neurosystem, the brain, and nerves.
Which controls the physio.
The physical body, exactly, which then impacts the immunosystem and the endocrinology, your hormones. They're all one system.
So when I give the command, wake up at 6:30 a.m. feeling refreshed, I'm issuing an order that affects all 5 of those systems at once.
Precisely. You're giving a conscious command in that suggestible theta state that primes your entire biological organism. You're telling your internal clock, the SCN, and the systems that regulate melatonin and cortisol to sync up for that specific wake time.
So it reduces the stress of being suddenly jolted awake.
Because the body has pre-anticipated the transition, the thought truly is the beginning of everything here.
Okay, now that we've primed the morning, let's discuss the foundational structure that dictates whether we respond to the world effectively or simply react to it poorly. We are looking at the 3-layered evolutionary brain model.
This model really helps us understand the source of our emotional chaos. At the very base is the brainstem, the reptilian part governing basic survival functions.
Right.
Above that is the limbic brain, our emotional core, and that houses the almond-shaped amygdala.
The amygdala is usually framed as the emotional baggage handler, but the sources really emphasize its role as a primal threat scanner.
That's its main job. It's the constant watchman, always running worst-case scenarios, always generating self-doubt, because its core directive is survival in a dangerous world.
And when it gets activated, it triggers that stress cascade.
The FFF responses: fight, flight, and freeze. And we experience fear as the internal prelude to all of those actions.
And the sources gave us that shocking statistic, that 80% of people are primarily controlled by this limbic system.
They exist in a perpetual limbic loop. This is that pattern of rumination, constantly revisiting past failures or anxieties about the future. It's like the brain playing the same mental cassette tape on repeat.
Which keeps the amygdala active and the person operating in survival mode, not peak performance mode.
Exactly.
So what's the antidote? How do you get out of that loop? Where does true human capacity and success actually reside?
That is the frontal cortex, or prefrontal cortex, the PFC, right behind your forehead. And this region is enormous in humans. It accounts for a staggering 40% of the entire brain.
Wow.
which is a clear indication of its evolutionary importance for our species. This is the commander, the executive function center.
And the power of the PFC is summarized in the 4 Cs. Let's define those for the listener.
Okay, so the PFC is the home of emotional control that's managing your reactions. It's commitment sticking to long-term goals, it's informed choices weighing complex variables, and its overall command the ability to direct your attention.
So fundamentally, the PFC allows you to take an automatic survival-driven reaction and convert it into a measured, goal-oriented response.
That's the whole game.
That ability to choose your response is the definition of freedom, really. But is PFC strength something you're born with? When does this commanding center get its primary training?
There are 2 critical development windows. The first is between 0 and 5 years old. The speed of neural growth in that period is almost unbelievable, up to 700 synaptic connections forming per second.
Wow.
This is where the seeds of control, focus, and emotional regulation are sown.
That's the foundational programming phase.
Yes, and the second critical window is between the ages of 13 and 20. While the foundation is set, the PFC is still maturing. So if consistent, disciplined habits like dedicated study, exercise, learning emotional regulation are established during this time, the strength of the PFC is pretty much cemented for life.
But for the majority of our listeners who are actively seeking to optimize their performance now, in the 25 to 40 age bracket, we have to address the myth that the brain is somehow finished or hardwired after adolescence.
That myth has to be challenged head-on. The concept of neuroplasticity is the great equalizer, and it's really the cornerstone of this deep dive.
Your brain is continuously capable of rewiring itself.
At any age. You can't just blame genetics or your early life environment for a weak PFC. The moment you commit to building strength through conscious effort, your brain starts creating new pathways.
So instead of thinking of it as a finished house, it's more like a sprawling forest. If you want a new path, you have to start clearing the undergrowth.
That's a perfect analogy. If you only use the limbic loop path, it becomes a superhighway. If you stop using it and intentionally start using the PFC path, you make that path clearer, faster, and more dominant.
So how do you do that? The sources outlined a 3-phase training program.
Right. Phase 1 is awareness.
Okay, the day audit. How does one conduct this to shine a spotlight on their own limbic loop?
Awareness is the first step out. You have to become an impartial observer of your own internal landscape. Ask yourself, when I encounter a critique from my boss, a traffic jam, did I react automatically or did I pause and issue a controlled response?
So you audit your emotional spikes.
Your knee-jerk behaviors, the content of your rumination. If you don't know where the energy is going, you can't manage it.
Okay, once that baseline is established, phase 2 is the active training we touched on earlier.
Phase 2 is active training. This means dedicated practice to build the strength of those alpha and theta waves. This isn't passive relaxation. This is actively working out that cognitive muscle. We'll detail the techniques next.
And phase 3 must involve managing the inputs, the external environment that either supports or actively inhibits this growth.
Phase 3 is energy management. You have to be ruthless about the external factors that prevent alpha and theta development. This includes, subtle environmental toxicity, being constantly immersed in anger or negativity, and critically, substances. Alcohol, nicotine, excessive, unregulated caffeine, they all chemically interfere with the brain's ability to achieve those calm, focused states, and they fundamentally weaken the PFC's ability to command.
If you want a high-performance brain, you can't simultaneously feed it inputs that actively reduce its cognitive strength.
You just can't.
Let's turn the theoretical concept of brainwaves into tangible daily training sessions. If the goal is to build PFC strength, we have to start by mastering alpha, the base state of calm focus.
Most people's baseline is already too high. They're stuck in low beta anxiety. So the first requirement is dedicated practice to find that relaxed, alert alpha state.
What's the easiest way to start this practice?
The first technique is so simple. 5 minutes of sitting quietly with your eyes closed. But the distinction here is crucial. You're not trying to stop thinking. You're simply letting the thoughts flow without engagement. Think of your thoughts like traffic moving past a window. You observe the traffic, but you don't jump onto the road and follow it. This non-engagement is the mechanism that allows the alpha state to dominate.
That non-engagement rule is counterintuitive for high achievers who feel they have to be mentally active all the time. There's another powerful physical technique linked to immediate alpha activation: grounding.
Grounding, or walking barefoot on natural surfaces like grass, soil, or sand. And there's a physiological mechanism at play here. The Earth maintains a negative electrical charge.
Right.
When you make direct contact, there's a transfer of free electrons, negative ions, into your body. This is believed to have an immediate calming and regulatory effect, promoting that relaxed alpha state almost instantly.
And for those who need a technological boost, especially early in the training phase, what about neuromodulation hacks?
The most accessible hack is using alpha-frequency binaural beats. These are audio tracks where a specific frequency, say 10 Hz, is played in one ear, and a slightly different one, maybe 10.5 Hz, is played in the other.
And your brain processes the difference.
Your brain processes the beat and naturally attempts to synchronize its own frequency to that rate. This process, called neural entrainment, gently nudges the brain into the relaxed alpha state. It's like a 5-minute cognitive supplement for calm.
So that handles the calm and receptive state, but we also need the gear for deep work. Beta, the focused problem-solving engine. How do we strengthen our capacity for intense concentration?
Beta is trained by demanding singular, sustained focus. And the technique for that is Tritaka, which just means fixed gazing. It involves staring unwaveringly at a single point, traditionally a candle flame or even a simple dot on a wall.
Why does staring at a flame build concentration? What's happening neurologically?
It forces the brain to overcome its natural tendency to flit its attention. Normally, your eyes are constantly making these tiny involuntary movements called saccades.
Okay.
Tritaka prevents these micro-movements, demanding sustained attention from the visual cortex and the PFC. By holding that focus for an extended period, you're building the muscle of concentration. You're telling the brain, this is the only input that matters right now.
And the sources suggest an optimal flow for training these states sequentially, not just randomly.
That's right. The most effective training often starts by engaging the intensity required for beta with Tritaka, which sharpens your focus. Then, you intentionally transition to alpha, eyes closed, stillness, to absorb and integrate that focus in a relaxed state.
And from there to theta?
From alpha, you can then transition to the deeper, more creative theta states if you're moving into advanced meditation. It's a conscious, structured manipulation of your operating system.
Now for the highest gear, gamma. This is associated with massive cognitive efficiency, information processing, rapid planning, high execution speed. How do we access that power?
Through an incredibly potent breathwork hack known as the power Brahmari, or the humming bee technique.
Humming bee.
Yeah. This involves taking a deep, slow inhalation and then exhaling while producing a continuous deep humming sound. This can be enhanced by the Shanmukhi Mudra, where you close the ears and eyes to reduce external sensory input.
What's the chemical key that this technique unlocks? It sounds amazing.
Nitric oxide. The Brahmari humming technique is scientifically proven to cause a significant and immediate boost in the production of vasodilatory nitric oxide in your paranasal sinuses.
And nitric oxide is a powerful molecule
That relaxes and widens blood vessels.
So when we hum, we are chemically forcing better circulation to the brain.
Exactly. This rapid vasodilation increases blood flow and oxygen transport, particularly to the frontal cortex. It's an instant cognitive reset, a rapid way to move out of mental fatigue and into high beta and gamma states.
How many do you do?
The sources recommend 3 to 4 rounds for an immediate, powerful boost in focus and alertness.
These wave training methods are all directed at optimizing our mental processing power, but what are we actually processing? The sources cite this profound study that simplifies success by revealing the narrow focus of human thought.
This audit of human thought patterns is perhaps the most impactful insight. Researchers track the average person who generates between 50 to 60,000 thoughts every single day. Every single day. And they found that regardless of geography, culture, or professional status, 99% of those thoughts perpetually revolve around only 3 core categories.
And those 3 categories are simple and universal: health, relationships, and work money, or wealth and profession.
That's the entire mental landscape. So if this is the absolute scope of human preoccupation, then the definition of success shifts dramatically.
Right.
Success is not about becoming a master of every obscure subject. It's about training your brain to become an exceptional problem solver within just those 3 categories.
And solving those problems requires that powerful triad of cognitive capacity we have been discussing.
It requires 3 things: generating the novel idea, possessing the resilience to face the inevitable setbacks, and executing the effective implementation. All of which, critically, rely on the strength of the frontal cortex built through the dedicated wave training we just mapped out.
We've established the foundation of brainwave training. Now, let's talk about optimization. The sources emphasize that monotony is the silent killer of cognitive plasticity, calling for continuous neurobics.
Right. First, let's debunk the pervasive 10% myth. The brain is fully engaged, constantly. Optimization isn't about accessing some dormant part.
Right, it's not like the movie Lucy.
Not at all. It's about providing continuous multisensory challenges to force the brain to reorganize and build new connections. When you repeat the same process every day, the neural circuits get lazy. They go on autopilot.
We need to constantly disrupt the routine to foster plasticity. What are some highly actionable neurobics examples that listeners can integrate immediately?
Start small but be consistent. Change the route you walk the dog or take to work. Vary the type of workout you do. If you run, try swimming or weight training.
Okay.
The easiest and most effective hack is using your non-dominant hand for mundane tasks, like brushing your teeth or clicking the computer mouse. This forces cross-hemispheric communication and immediately fires up dormant circuits.
But the sources dive into an incredibly advanced challenge that shows the full extent of this potential: mirror writing.
Mirror writing is the ultimate forced plasticity hack. You write backward, starting from the right side of the page and moving left, so that the text is only legible when you hold it up to a mirror.
That sounds incredibly difficult. What does that process achieve in the brain?
It completely bypasses the established, highly efficient motor cortex pathways used for standard left-to-right writing. It forces the communication center, the corpus callosum, to work overtime.
And people actually do this.
Leonardo da Vinci was known to use it, and the sources mention specific military officers who utilized it, sometimes learning to write with both hands in multiple languages, to keep their cognitive function sharp and prevent intellectual complacency during long, isolated deployments. It's a profound commitment to continuous growth.
Now let's align these peak performance efforts with our natural energy rhythms. We need to understand our chronotypes.
Your chronotype is your inherent biological clock. It dictates when your energy and alertness naturally peak. The sources break down 4 basic types. You've got the lion,
The early riser.
the early riser. Energy peaks early morning, crashes early evening. They should schedule their high beta, high gamma work before lunch.
Okay.
Then there's the bear, which is the most common type. They follow the solar cycle, peak mid-morning, and have a mid-afternoon slump.
Then the wolf, the night owl.
The night owl. They struggle to wake early, feel groggy until late morning, but their cognitive peak occurs in the evening. They're productive late into the night.
And the last one.
The dolphin. The irregular sleeper, often light sleepers with inconsistent wake cycles. They have to treat sleep regulation as their primary mission.
The insight here is crucial. Success is exponentially higher for those who are aware of their chronotype and align their most demanding work with their natural peak energy window.
Absolutely. Trying to force a wolf to do deep work at 7 a.m. is just fighting their biology. Awareness allows you to sequence your day correctly.
But can you change your chronotype?
The sources assure us they are not destiny. With sustained commitment, purpose, and tools like regulated light exposure, you can shift your schedule. You can train yourself to become an early rising lion if professional or family commitments demand it.
How do we know if all this training, the movers ritual, the Brahmari, the neurobics is actually making a difference? We need objective validation.
The mantra of optimization is universal. What you can measure, you can manage. This moves us toward quantifiable assessments like a brain fitness score or, most importantly, the quantitative electroencephalogram analysis, a QEEG.
Okay, let's briefly detail what a QEEG scan tells us about the brain of a peak performer. What are the key metrics we're looking for?
A QEEG maps brainwave activity across the entire cortex. We look for 3 primary indicators of optimized performance. First, a high alpha peak.
What does that mean in practical terms?
Well, the alpha wave typically centers around 9.5 to 10 hertz. Top performers, like Olympic athletes, often show a higher, sharper alpha peak. This correlates directly with superior judgment and spatial awareness.
And
Crucially, a high alpha peak indicates the brain's ability to efficiently suppress irrelevant information, allowing them to remain calm and focused amidst chaos.
So it's not just having alpha, it's having a highly controlled, powerful alpha state. What about that traffic jam scenario we talked about earlier?
That's reflected in phase coherence. Think of your brain regions as musicians in an orchestra. High coherence means they're all playing the same piece in perfect time.
And poor coherence.
They're all playing different pieces at different speeds. A cognitive traffic jam, irrational crosstalk. If a person describes chaotic, overwhelming, or paranoid thoughts, the scan often shows poor coherence, an unmanaged brain.
And finally, how does the QEEG diagnose the distracted mind?
If a scan shows excessive theta in an eyes-open state, it's a clear sign of mind wandering and distractibility. The brain is drifting into its creative pre-sleep state when it should be locked into high beta for task engagement.
And the fix for that is what we talked about.
It's targeted, the intentional practice of Tritaka, which forces the brain out of that dreamy, distracted theta state and into sharp beta concentration.
Let's shift now to the complex chemistry that governs our emotional lives, beginning with the fascinating differences between genders. The sources suggest structural differences in the brain are minimal, but the chemical and emotional wiring is drastically different.
That's a consensus. Minimal structural variation, maybe slight differences in the corpus callosum or vocal lobes, but major differences in how we process and lay down emotional memory. And this chemical difference is most vividly illustrated by what the sources term the breakup divide.
Okay, let's break down the neurochemical investment difference in the early stages of a relationship.
Women, generally speaking, release high levels of oxytocin, the powerful bonding and nesting hormone, much earlier in the relationship cycle.
So it signals immediate emotional investment and attachment.
Exactly. It's telling the brain, this is an investment for the long term. Men, conversely, are typically driven by testosterone and a pursuit mechanism, which delays the deep release of those bonding hormones.
This pre-anticipatory investment means that when a relationship ends, the woman processes the grief immediately because that chemical attachment is severed.
Correct. The sources explain that women experience an acute, intense, immediate period of sadness, crying, and disruption, but because the emotional investment was upfront and intense, they typically complete the processing and recover fully and permanently within 6 to 18 months.
A painful but clean catharsis.
Exactly.
And men, suppressing and delaying that emotional investment, face a long-term cost.
That's where the damage accumulates. Because the man's emotional hit is delayed, he often escapes into work, new partners, or other distractions. The underlying emotional hit, the loss of partnership, the disruption of routine, manifests 6 months to a year later as long-term sadness, depression, and often, critically, it's driven by FOMO.
The fear of missing out on a better choice. How does that relate back to the evolutionary drive?
The suppressed limbic-driven anxiety is fueled by the subconscious need to compare future partners to the one that was lost, seeking the optimal choice for security and offspring. The man often delays processing and instead enters a cycle of comparison and dissatisfaction, which leads to years of minor emotional hits.
While the woman has already processed the loss and moved forward.
Right. It's a totally different timeline.
Now, whether it's managing a breakup or daily anxiety, we need tools for immediate emotional regulation. What is the 3-step strategy for managing acute pain or grief?
The 3-step ABC approach is the most reliable. Awareness naming and acknowledging the emotion, controlled breathing to interrupt the limbic loop, and commitment to maintaining the daily positive rituals that restore PFC power.
The breath is the fastest bridge.
It's the fastest, most effective bridge between your conscious mind and your autonomic nervous system.
For anxiety specifically, we have the quick hack, the 4-7-8 technique.
This is a fast-acting emergency brake for the nervous system.
Yeah.
You inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, and exhale slowly for 8 counts, always emphasizing breathing through the nose.
That 1-to-2 exhale ratio is the key.
It is. It's designed to rapidly stimulate the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the autonomic nervous system.
And stimulating the vagus nerve achieves immediate calm by doing what?
It immediately stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest. And that overrides the sympathetic system, the fight or flight response. The ratio forces a physiological calm that the brain has to follow. It's an instant reset.
Let's address cathartic expression, specifically crying. Should we stop tears when they begin?
The sources strongly discourage automatically suppressing tears. Crying is a form of emotional catharsis, a relief mechanism that serves a vital psychological function.
It only becomes a problem when it's chronic?
It only becomes problematic and indicative of an unresolved emotional issue if it becomes incessant.
And what are the 2 core underlying causes of incessant crying?
Usually it's an unfulfilled desire, a deep longing or hope that was shattered, or a perceived loss of power over an inevitable event, like a death or a major financial reversal.
So the solution isn't to control the symptom, the tear.
The solution is to fix the root equation, to accept the inevitable loss, or to find a new, achievable desire to focus the PFC on.
We must also address the ubiquitous issue of addiction. The sources claim 95% of people are addicted to something. What is the neurological impact of addiction?
Addiction involves actual structural damage and chemical changes. It essentially knocks off the power of the frontal cortex, weakening executive function, judgment, and long-term commitment.
And the key is distinguishing between addictions that serve you And those that...
that to serve you.
Right.
An addiction to meditation or exercise serves you. An addiction to substances, constant conflict, or self-sabotage that leads to negative wiring.
And the most common deserving addiction for high performers is automatic negative thoughts, ANTs.
ANTs are the default mode for the unmanaged brain. They're just the background noise. When researchers scan peak performers, the default mode network, the DMN.
The network responsible for self-referential thought and rumination.
Right. That network is quiet or nearly silent during focused work. In those stuck in negative self-talk, the limbic system is constantly feeding the DMN, amplifying self-doubt and paralyzing the PFC. The long-term solution must be physiological, changing the brain's chemistry and wiring to silence that default negativity.
Finally, let's look at a fascinating hack for building psychological resilience through physical challenge, the SPICE theory.
This is a powerful insight into pain tolerance. Your body's pain management system, controlled by the thalamus, the sensory relay station, it doesn't differentiate between internal emotional pain, like rejection, and external physical pain, like a stubbed toe.
So how does eating spicy food physically train my brain to handle a professional setback?
When you eat spicy food, the intense sensation from the capsaicin is carried along small, specialized nerve fibers called delta fibers to the thalamus. Initially, the brain registers this as intense pain.
Right.
But through repeated, intentional exposure training, your tolerance, the parietal cortex learns to handle these high-intensity signals without triggering a full panic response. It learns, I can handle more signal intensity than I thought.
And here's where it gets truly interesting. That increased tolerance capacity is then applied globally.
Precisely. The brain applies this higher threshold to all incoming high-intensity signals, whether they're physical, like an intense workout, or psychological, like criticism or rejection or loss. By stress testing your sensory pathways with spicy food, you are literally increasing your overall mental and emotional resilience threshold for life.
This deep dive has provided the blueprint for internal success. We've proven that the limits to your potential are not external. They're simply the limits of your commitment to managing your own neuroscience. If you take nothing else from this massive conversation, remember these 3 core actionable takeaways.
Number 1, your foundation is alpha and theta. You must prioritize stillness and silence, even just 5 minutes, to build the calm capacity and receptive state of your frontal cortex. This is non-negotiable for sustained performance.
Number 2, master the first 5 minutes of action. Override the inertia and use momentum to defeat procrastination. Rewire your reality through intentional commitment, forcing your brain to shift into the beta gear required for execution.
And number 3, carry breathwork tools with you everywhere. Techniques like the 4-7-8 and Power Brahmari are simple, immediate physiological reset buttons. They allow you to seize control of your autonomic nervous system, moving you instantly out of the limbic FFF response and back into PFC command.
Success and potential are limitlessly available because everyone starts with the same physical, magnificent asset, the human brain. What defines your ultimate destination isn't that initial capacity.
Your destiny is defined by the resilience and strength you build in your commander, your frontal cortex. It is your ability to face failure, criticism, and loss while remaining internally unperturbed and locked onto your long-term purpose.
So, we leave you with this final, provocative thought. Are you treating your brain like the high-performance machine it is designed to be? You have the capacity to design and build a billionaire brain through simple, consistent, committed daily rituals. The choice to stop blaming genetics or environment and start focusing on what you commit to is entirely yours. Go take command of your own mind.